Families are like mobiles. Each member, an individual art form, is connected to the others through invisible strings. When the wind blows, all parts move individually and harmoniously. Mobiles are delicate. If one piece breaks, if a string is severed or becomes knotted, the whole mobile is affected. Similarly, the actions of one family member affect the entire family. When one family member is affected by substance abuse, the whole family is affected.
Unsure.
Hopeless.
Frightened. Useless.
Depressed.
It made my dad crazy. Drug addiction has changed our whole family dynamic. It was the cause of my brother-in-law's death.
My addiction started when I was 16. What started off as a once or twice thing became an everyday thing by the time I was 17. At the age of 18, I graduated high school and moved down to Mesa, Arizona to get away from that lifestyle. Though I did remain abstinent for periods of time, I never stayed clean for more than 6 to 9 months, and more importantly, my behaviors didn't change. The label that was placed on me for this mistake still remained, which lowered my self-worth. My life turned upside down when painkillers came into my life. All of the struggles with low self-worth, self-esteem, and self-confidence didn't matter anymore because I didn't have to feel. I was numb and it felt amazing. It wasn't until 2005 that I was able to consistently get my hands on them. This is where everything started to go downhill. I was introduced to heroin. This habit changed from taking a single 10 milligram Percocet a day to smoking anywhere from a half to a full gram of heroin a day. In my opioid addiction from 2005 until I became addicted to meth in 2012. At this point, my life took a huge turn for the worse. What started out as only smoking a little bit each day quickly escalated into shooting up a half gram at a time, or at least 2 to 3 times a day. From July 5th of 2012 until the beginning of September 2012, I picked up 3 degree felonies for possession and 2 DUIs. Through this, I was not the only person I was hurting. In fact, my family probably suffered as much as I did, if not more. The emotional turmoil that I put them through was insane, especially my mother. My mother and I had a very codependent relationship. All she wanted was to have companionship, which I took advantage, and it ultimately ended up in her enabling me to use even more. When I wasn't selling drugs to supply my habit, my mother was my financial support to secure more drugs to keep me from being sick. To have a slight idea of what I put my mother through financially, in that 3-month period between July and September of 2012, I stole roughly $8,000 from my mother to supply my meth habit. However, the emotional pain I caused her was a lot worse than the financial. I remember her telling me stories about when I was coming down from meth, she would come into my bedroom to check on me because I was sleeping and not moving for 18 hours after being up for 2 to 4 days. At that point, my brother met up with 2 of my other siblings and they had a discussion about what to do. They all came to the conclusion that calling the cops on me and having me arrested would be the best thing they could do. At the time, I was very angry, but looking back on it now, this is one of the greatest things they could have done for me, and I can only imagine how hard it was for them to do this. They each mailed my judge a letter and pleaded to keep me in jail so I would stay safe. They all pleaded to the drug court judge to let me in their program. Being in shackles every time in court and having to see the look on my mother's face, the pain it caused her to see me up there, finally clicked. In 1997, at the age of 18, I started my path to addiction. I was involved in a car accident that resulted in me being prescribed oxycodone and hydrocodone. At the time, I was not dependent on these drugs. They were just a painkiller to help me until I was fully healed. I started off by taking 1 or 2 a day. If the pain was really severe, I would double up on the meds. After the doctor said my bones and wounds were healed and I will no longer need the opioids, I became very dependent on them. I wanted to feel that way again all the time. I did not want to be in this sober state of mind. I would steal oxycodone and hydrocodone from friends, relatives, or even acquaintances. Once that supply was out, I had to start looking for it on the streets. I spent every bit of money I had to feed my addiction. I would go into my mom's purse and write myself checks for thousands of dollars. Pawned everything I owned and some of my mother's things. I had no remorse to how others felt until I met my wife. We had a lot in common, like our opioid addiction, for example. We tried to become sober together, but that only lasted about 4 months. Soon after, my wife became pregnant and was sober for those 9 months and was able to stay sober thereafter. During the pregnancy, I was in prison for possession, which resulted in my wife leaving me and taking my daughter to find a better life for themselves. Over the next 12 years, I was in and out of prison for different crimes. After my last incarceration in February of 2015, I made sure that would be the last time I was in prison and I would clean myself up and be in my family's life again. I was able to regain joint custody of my daughter, working full-time, and mending relationships I had broken due to my addiction. 6 months had passed and I relapsed. I began using again and again, and I fell back into my old habits. In September of 2015, my addiction became so bad and I was so dependent on my drug of choice that something in my mind told me I needed more. I needed more than just the regular dose in order to feel good enough to fall asleep tonight, so I did just that. I took more than usual. The next morning, my daughter came to my room to wake me up so I could take her to school. She said my name several times, even shook me, and I did not respond. She then called my mother to pick her up for school because she thought I was asleep. When my mom arrived, I was already gone. That feeling in the back of my head saying, "Take more to feel better," was my last thought. At 36 years old, my addiction took my own life, my family, relationships, and my freedom away.
There are many resources to help both those who are addicted and those who are affected by loved ones that are dealing with an addiction. There are inpatient facilities as well as outpatient facilities. There are also many support groups. Research each resource to find one that will work with your own circumstances.
I decided to make a commitment to myself and make a change. On July 29, 2013, I made the decision to never use again. This is the single most greatest day of my life. My mother passed away on December 19, 2015, and because of this decision, I was able to be with her on her last breath. I felt at peace. At that moment, I felt all of my guilt and shame lift off my shoulders because I was able to be there with her in her last moments, like she was with me throughout my entire drug court experience. I graduated with my Bachelor's of Social Work and started my Master's program in 2019. I will graduate with my MSW in May of 2020, and I plan to specialize in substance use therapy. I made that commitment to go back to school in the spring of 2015 and started my academic career on academic probation because of my poor academic performance in previous years. I transferred to Utah State with a GPA of 2.67, and through hard work and determination, I graduated cum laude with a 3.5 GPA. Continuing that same line, I have been able to maintain a 3.7 GPA throughout my graduate studies.